Now that we have all our event handlers and our data in place, we need to hook it all together using state. Now we could use React's regular useState, but we're actually going to use useReducer in this case. You can go to reactjs.org and look up useReducer if you're not familiar with how it works. But basically, reducers are really good if you have a bunch of state that's all integrating together and different actions are going to update different pieces. It's just a lot easier to kind of coordinate all those things versus a bunch of different use state statements. So we're going to go ahead and import use reducer, and we're going to create a reducer. And the arguments it takes are state and an action. And pretty typically, you create a switch statement which takes the action dot type. So action will be an object with a type key. And then you'll have different cases. We'll fill this in later. And then we'll just return the state for now. Finally, you need a default case. And we'll also return the state there. So let's go ahead and hook this up. So we're going to say const, we'll call it just the state, and dispatch. So the things you get when you call use reducer. There we go. And we need the reducer. We also need to pass in an initial state. So we can pass in the fake data for now, and we'll see what that looks like. So let's go ahead and console log the state. All right, so we get that fake data, and that works perfectly well. So we could pass that down to here, but we see there's actually a problem with is reversed. We need some way to keep track of that. So let's make this initial data actually an object that has is reversed, and then it has items to be fake data. So we'll see that state. It's going to blow up, but we'll see is reversed and items. So here we need to do state.items, and then here we'll do state.isReversed. And this should all work again. Perfect. All right. Now we need to actually create all the different actions. So we're going to have a few things here, right? We're going to have a toggle choice, add item, remove item, reverse list, and reverse data. And the way you want to do this is you want to actually dispatch an object with a type, and it'll be some sort of string. So what I like to do, if I'm not using TypeScript or something like that, is go ahead and just make some camel case, some screen case strings at the very top, and I can just pass these around. That way I don't actually have to spell this correctly every single time. So we'll have a toggle choice, and again, we'll keep returning the state. We're going to actually deal with updating it in a second, but let's kind of create all of these different versions of what we need. So this next one is going to be add item, and then we've got remove item, reverse list, oops, and then finally reset data. All right, so then we're gonna add item, go ABS code, there we go. We're gonna remove item, reverse the list, and then of course we need one more, and then this one we call reset data, right? All right, perfect. So we've got all of these, and now how do we actually hook these up? Well, what we do is we need to wrap each of these in dispatch. So we'll wrap it in parentheses and then dispatch, and inside of them we'll have a type. Now the type for toggle choice will obviously be toggle choice. The type for add item will be add item. Type for remove item, oops, not reset, remove. There we go. Reverse and reset. Perfect. Now there might be also additional parameters and things that are passed in, at which point we'll pass them in probably through here and into here, and then they'll come in here, but we'll deal with that when we get there. So for now, we've got all this going on, which is really great. One thing that we're going to see immediately that we need to do is we actually are going to have to reuse this fake data. So it's not really great making this the initial data. It'd be nice to kind of like recreate this every single time. So what you can do with the use reducer is you can pass in a third argument called, they call it a init, but basically it's just a function. This is kind of the convention is to call the function a init. And so in this case, we're actually going to return what do we have here? This object that we have here. So I can just cut this out and pass it in here. And we can actually pass in the initial items. And we'll just use those every time. So what are these initial items? Well, it's whatever's passed right here. So we'll use fake data again here. And that's how we can have an init function that goes ahead and creates the object that we need. And everything should be working correctly. Great, so let's go ahead and implement some of these things. So I think one of the easiest ones to do is just to do the reverse list. So that's pretty easy. So we're going to get the state dot items, and then we can just reverse them, right? And we'll return that state. So we're going to say reverse. Now it did not work because we're actually going ahead and reversing it in place. This is actually a mutation. So what we need to do is we need to create a copy of this. So we're going to say const items copy equals state dot items, but the way to create a shell copy is to spread it across like that. We got items copy, and then we want to actually return the spread of the state, and then items will be items copy. We can say reverse, and then it reverses, which is perfect. So we have to do this sort of stuff so that we're not actually directly mutating a state, because the state has to remain pure. Every single time we update it, we have to actually create new objects, or at least not mutate the objects that we have. If we didn't change it at all, we can continue using those. So let's go ahead and finish the rest of these. So what do we have here? We have add item. That one should be fairly straightforward. So we're going to want a new item. Oh, let me put this above that. And we can actually go ahead and use something that we get from fetch data, or rather from the fake data, and it's called also add item. So new item, we'll add the item, and what it takes is it actually takes the length. So we need to do state.items.length. And that'll give us the new item, and then we can say new items, and we'll spread the state.items, and we'll just add the new item. We could use concat, but I just like this format a little bit better. And then again, we're going to return the spreading of the state with items assigned to new items. And that should be able to allow us to add an item. Perfect, so that's working greatly. All right, and then we've got remove item. This one should actually be pretty easy as well. So we're gonna do a similar thing here. We're gonna do the new items, and we can actually just do new items dot pop, and that'll just pop it right off, right? I'll remove it, and then again, we're going to do this return statement. So we can just do a lot of copy and paste here, because writing all these spread statements and whatnot can be a little bit annoying. So we're going to remove them all. We can keep adding them, and that's great. All right, we've got reset data. This one should actually be pretty straightforward as well, because we made this init statement. We can go ahead and say init, and then pass in. We could just package in the fake data, but I'm going to go ahead and actually make a clone of it. So I'm going to write clone around it. Now, clone doesn't actually exist here yet. So what we need to install a package that allows us to do deep copy. So we're going to use a little simple one. So I'm going to open up the terminal here, and we're going to say, actually we're using yarn here, yarn add RFDC. So that stands for really fast deep clone, or deep copy, one of those two. So we're going to let that resolve in the background. And then up here, we'll say import RFDC from RFDC. And then the way it works is you have to actually define clone equals RFDC, and then you just call it. I think you can pass in some parameters here. Basically, that's all that we're going to do. So let's make sure that it's finished. All right, looks like it finished. There we go. So we can, well, we can't actually see it resetting, but if we reverse, we can see it resets, and that's perfect. So that's great. We've got that all working. Now, finally, there's a couple things that we want to do. We actually forgot one thing here. So again, we have this is reverse. So we want to make sure that this is the opposite of what it was before. Let's see, what am I missing? I'm missing a comma. So is reverse needs to be the opposite of what it was before. So we click it, it's off. And then if we reset preferences, we can see that init sets is reverse default. So that's actually working well. All right, the only thing we need left is the toggle choice. So this one is definitely going to be the more complicated one, so bear with me here. The first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to get the items out of the state. Now we are going to need to get a couple of things from action, and we'll add those a little bit later. Basically, what we're going to want is we're going to want the item ID itself, and then the option key. So the key is like something like React, Vue, jQuery, based on how these objects look. So we're going to pull these out of action. And then we are going to get the index. So items.find index. And then from there, we have the ID. So what we want to do is we want to match up the ID to the item ID. And that'll give us the item index. And I'll explain why we're using the index in just a second. The first thing we want to do is typically when you're doing this kind of find stuff, it's good to just go ahead and check, hey, did this actually exist or not? So if it didn't exist, we're going to get a -1 back, and we'll just return the state. We're just going to bail. We're not going to let them know that it didn't work or anything. We'll just bail. This shouldn't ever happen, but just in case it does, it's always good to have that idea. So then we're going to get the item itself with the item index, and then from there we're going to say get the option dot options, and then this is where the option key itself comes in. So this is an object. Options is an object. They each point to true or false. I think a constant needs to be in front of there. They all point to true or false and give us back whatever value it was. So we're going to actually change it to the opposite of this. But what we need to do first is we need to say options copy. So we're going to create a copy of this item dot options, and then we're going to say get the option key again. So this is a way to use a variable to set a key inside of an object. And with that, we are going to spread the option itself. So we're making a copy there. And we're going to say the value is the opposite of option dot value. So very nested objects here. And I kind of deliberately made this a little bit convoluted just to demonstrate the level of complexity that can come when you're trying to make these sort of deep state changes. So then we have the item copy, and we want to spread the item itself. Options will be the options copy. And then we're good there. And then we want to say items copy, so we got that. Oops, dot splice. Sorry, I read that we need to make this first. I thought we'd already declared this. So we'll say const items copy, and again, a shallow copy of the items themselves. We're going to splice, and so how splice works is we start at an index, so we already have that. And then if we say 1, it means you're going to delete it because we don't actually want that anymore. But then if you add another argument, wherever you started from, you'll actually you'll splice in this new object or whatever it is. So item copy. So we're deleting the old one, we're adding a new one, and we're all doing this to a shallow copy of what we had. So that's why we grabbed the index itself. So that's really great. And then the final thing we need to do is just return the state, and we should be good. So it's not new items, it's items copy. A little bit of naming discrepancies, but that's okay. So there, so not 100% working. So let's see, we've got something going wrong. So let's go ahead and console log this. So if we refresh and we click it, we can see nothing's actually getting console log. Now, silly me, we didn't actually hook this up. So if you remember when we used toggle choice, we're just dispatching it, but we said we actually need to get a couple of things from action. So we need these two elements to be passed around. So we'll say we're going to go ahead and get these, and we'll pass them in. And let's see, so we now need to go trace back through everything that we had. So we'll go to cards. Cards just passes this along, so we're okay there. We can go to card. Again, it's just passing it along. So then we'll actually go into checklist. So again, what we need to actually pass is these two items. So we need to make this an inline function so it doesn't just call it immediately. So let's see, what do we have? We have the key itself is the option key, and then the ID itself was also passed along. So now this should work. So we'll click React, we'll click Tigers, jQuery, and it all works. We can add more items, we can reverse the list, and then we can click Reset the Preferences, and everything is reset.